June 1992, Springfield, Missouri. 3 women went to sleep in a locked house after a graduation party, and by morning they had vanished, leaving behind their cars, their purses, their keys, and a family dog that never barked. How do you make 3 people disappear from a locked home without waking a single neighbor or leaving a single clue? The house at 1717 East Delmar Street looked like every other house on the block. It was a small, single-story home in a quiet neighborhood in Springfield, Missouri. Nothing about it seemed different or dangerous. Nothing about it suggested that on one warm June night, it would become the center of America's most baffling mystery. Susie Streeter was 19 years old. She had just graduated from Kickapoo High School on June 6, 1992. Her best friend, Stacy McCall, graduated too. They were both excited, full of plans for the future, ready to celebrate. That Saturday night, they went to parties all over Springfield. They laughed with friends. They took photos. They talked about their summer plans. Everything felt perfect. The original plan was simple. After the parties, Susie and Stacy would sleep over at a friend's house with other graduates. They would wake up the next morning and drive together to White Water, a water park in Branson, Missouri. It was supposed to be the perfect start to their summer of freedom. But when they arrived at their friend's house late that night, they found a problem. Too many people had shown up. The house was packed. There was barely room to walk, let alone sleep. The girls stood outside and talked it over. They decided to change their plans. Instead of staying in a crowded house where they would get no rest, they would drive to Susie's house. Susie's mother, Cheryl Levitt, lived alone. There would be plenty of room. They could sleep in comfortable beds, wake up refreshed, and still make it to Branson in the morning. At around 2:15 in the morning, Susie and Stacy arrived at 1717 East Delmar Street. Cheryl Levitt was already home. She was 47 years old, a hairdresser who worked hard and lived quietly. Earlier that evening, around 11:15, she had talked on the phone with a friend about painting a chest of drawers. She sounded normal, happy, relaxed. She had no idea what the next few hours would bring. The house was small but tidy. Cheryl kept it clean. There were family photos on the walls. The living room had comfortable furniture. Everything had its place. When Susie and Stacy walked inside that night, they probably kicked off their shoes, maybe grabbed a snack, maybe talked quietly so they would not wake Cheryl. The family dog, a small, friendly animal, greeted them. Everything felt safe. Everything felt normal. Somewhere between 2:15 in the morning and 7:30 in the morning, something impossible happened. 3 women vanished from that house. Not 1, not 2, all 3, and they left everything behind. When friends came to pick up Susie and Stacy the next morning for their trip to Branson, nobody answered the door. The friends knocked. They called out. They walked around the house and peered in windows. The cars were still in the driveway. Susie's car was there. Stacy's car was there. Cheryl's car was there. All 3 vehicles sat exactly where they had been parked the night before. The friends found the door unlocked. They went inside, calling the women's names. The house was quiet. The dog was there, calm and friendly. Nothing seemed broken or knocked over. But the women were gone. Their purses sat on the counter, untouched. Their keys were still in the house. Their jewelry was still there. Even their cigarettes were there. Nobody goes anywhere without their purse. Nobody leaves for a day trip without their car keys. Nobody vanishes without taking a single thing. The friends walked through each room. In Cheryl's bedroom, the bed looked slept in. The covers were pulled back. The pillows showed the shape of a head. One of the window blinds hung at an odd angle, bent as if someone had looked through it quickly or roughly. In Susie's room, her bed also looked slept in. Everything suggested the women had gone to sleep that night like any other night. But there was something else, something that made the friends stop cold. The glass globe covering the porch light was broken. Pieces of glass lay scattered on the front porch, not inside the house, outside, as if someone had broken it from inside, or as if something had happened there in the dark early morning hours. The friends did not know what to think. Maybe the women had left early for some reason. Maybe they got a ride with someone else. Maybe there was a simple explanation. So the friends did what seemed helpful at the time. They started cleaning. They emptied ashtrays. They washed coffee cups. They straightened furniture. They were trying to be nice, trying to help, trying to make sense of a confusing situation. They had no idea they were destroying a crime scene. Then someone noticed the answering machine. The little red light was blinking. There was a message. One of the friends pressed play. A voice came through the speaker. Nobody remembers now exactly what it said. Nobody wrote it down. But here's what everyone agrees on. After listening to the message, someone erased it. Maybe by accident. Maybe because they thought it was unimportant. Maybe because they were nervous and pressed the wrong button. That message is gone forever. And police believe it might have held the only clue to what happened that night. By the time police arrived, between 10 and 20 people had walked through the house. They had touched things, moved things, cleaned things. The crime scene was ruined. If there had been fingerprints, they were smudged. If there had been small pieces of evidence, they were swept away. If there had been anything out of place that could tell investigators what happened, it was now straightened and put back. Police began asking questions. When was the last time anyone saw the women? When was the last time anyone talked to them? The timeline became clear. Cheryl had talked to her friend at 11:15 the night before. Susie and Stacy had been seen at parties until after midnight. They had arrived at the house around 2:15 in the morning, and by 7:30 in the morning, when friends arrived, all three were gone. That left a window of just over 5 hours. 5 hours and 15 minutes when something impossible happened. The official first thought was simple. Maybe the women left voluntarily. Maybe they had some emergency. Maybe they would come back soon with a reasonable explanation. But that idea fell apart fast. Their purses were there. Their money was there. Their identification cards were there. Their cars were there. Nobody leaves home without their wallet and car. Nobody goes on a trip without taking anything at all. Then police considered that maybe one woman left voluntarily and the others went to help her. But that made no sense either. Why would all three leave without purses, without keys, without telling anyone? Why would they not call someone? Why would they leave the door unlocked? The truth settled in slowly, like cold water rising. This was not voluntary. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. Something bad had happened in that house. Something that made three grown women disappear in the middle of the night without a sound, without a fight, without a trace. Police classified the case officially. 3 missing persons. But everyone knew it was more than that. This was an abduction. This was a crime. and it had happened in a quiet neighborhood where people slept peacefully just feet away, where nobody heard anything, where nobody saw anything, where the only witnesses were a broken porch light and an erased answering machine message. The number 3 kept appearing. 3 women, 3 cars, 3 purses, 3 lives stopped in an instant. And one question burned in everyone's mind. How do you make 3 people vanish from a locked house without leaving evidence, without making noise, without anyone noticing? The answer was disturbing. You do not. Not unless you planned it perfectly. Not unless you knew exactly what you were doing. Not unless you had done something like this before. And that thought, more than anything else, cracked the case wide open and let the horror spill out. The Springfield Police Department had never seen anything like this. Missing person cases usually made sense. Someone ran away, someone had an accident, someone left clues behind. But this case broke every rule. Police set up a timeline using every piece of information they could find. The timeline was tight and terrifying. 2 in the morning. That was when police believed the danger started. Maybe 2:15. Maybe 2:30. Somewhere in those dark, early morning hours of June 7th, someone came to the house at 1717 East Delmar Street. The timeline gave investigators a window. The women vanished between 2 in the morning and 8 in the morning. 6 hours. In a residential neighborhood, during a time when people were home, sleeping in houses all around. And nobody heard screaming. Nobody heard cars speeding away. Nobody heard anything at all. On June 9th, just 2 days after the disappearance, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the case. The FBI does not join every missing person case. They join when something is unusual, serious, or crosses state lines. The fact that 3 people vanished at once with no evidence, no witnesses, and no clear answers was enough. This was not normal. This was not explainable. This needed more resources, more investigators, more expertise. Police started with the physical evidence. They went through the house inch by inch. They looked for signs of struggle, and they found almost nothing. The broken porch light globe was the only clear sign that something violent had happened. The pieces of glass lay on the porch, shining in the sun. Police photographed them, measured them, tried to understand what breaking that light meant. Did someone break it while forcing their way in? Did it break during a struggle? Did someone inside break it, trying to signal for help? Inside the house, police found more questions than answers. Cheryl's bed showed clear signs of being slept in. The covers were pulled back on one side. The sheets were wrinkled. One of the window blinds hung bent, as if someone had pulled it aside to look out, or as if someone outside had pushed it aside to look in. Police took photos. They measured the angle of the bent blind. They tried to understand what it meant. But there were no overturned lamps, no knocked over furniture, no broken dishes, no blood, no torn clothing, no scattered belongings. The house looked almost normal, and that was the problem. When 3 people are taken against their will, there should be chaos. There should be evidence of fear, fighting, fleeing. But there was only quiet and order and absence. Police found the purses lined up on a table, 3 purses. Each one contained money, identification, and personal items. Police checked every pocket, every compartment. Nothing was missing. Nothing was disturbed. The cigarettes were there too. Cheryl smoked. Her pack sat on the counter, barely touched. Women who smoke do not leave home without cigarettes. These were small details, but they mattered. They proved that nobody planned to leave. Nobody packed. Nobody prepared. Whatever happened, happened fast. The cars told the same story. All three vehicles sat in the driveway, locked and untouched. Police searched each one. They found graduation gifts in Susie's car. They found everyday items in Cheryl's car. They found nothing that explained anything. The keys to all three cars were inside the house. You cannot drive without car keys. You cannot leave town without a vehicle. The women had no way to go anywhere unless someone took them. Police knocked on every door in the neighborhood. They asked the same questions over and over. Did you see anything unusual that night? Did you hear any sounds? Did you notice any strange cars? Did you see anyone walking around? The answers were all the same. No, 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 no. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything. It was as if the women had been erased by an invisible hand. By June 14th, the investigation shifted. Police stopped looking for 3 missing women and started looking for 3 bodies. They brought in volunteers. They organized search parties. They walked through woods and fields around Springfield. They checked abandoned buildings. They searched parks and rivers. They covered miles of ground, looking under every bridge, behind every barn, in every forgotten corner. They found nothing. The crime scene problems grew worse as investigators learned more about what happened that first morning. 10 to 20 people had walked through the house before police arrived. Friends had cleaned. They had washed dishes and emptied trash. They had touched doorknobs and moved furniture. Every surface that might have held a fingerprint was now smudged. Every corner that might have held evidence was now swept clean. The friends meant well. They thought they were helping. But they had accidentally destroyed the most important evidence the case would ever have. Then there was the answering machine. That erased message haunted investigators. What had the voice said? Who had called? Was it a clue? Was it a threat? Was it the person who took the women calling to taunt someone or to establish an alibi? Nobody knew. The message was gone. And with it went what police believed could have been the key to solving the case. Witnesses came forward slowly. Some remembered seeing Susie and Stacy at the graduation parties. They remembered the girls laughing and taking photos. They remembered them looking happy and safe. Other witnesses remembered seeing Cheryl earlier in the day. She had seemed normal. She had no enemies that anyone knew about. She lived a quiet life. She worked. She came home. She talked to friends. There was no reason for anyone to want to hurt her. But investigators found small inconsistencies. Some people remembered Susie mentioning that she felt watched recently. Nothing specific, just a feeling. Other people remembered Cheryl saying she thought someone had been in her yard. Again, nothing clear, just unease. These were not solid leads. They were feelings, impressions, worries that maybe meant something or maybe meant nothing. Police started building a list of people to interview. They talked to ex-boyfriends, they talked to co-workers, they talked to neighbors and friends and anyone who had any connection to the 3 women, and they ran background checks. They looked for criminal records. They searched for anyone with a history of violence or stalking or obsession. The list grew long. The interviews took weeks, and nothing led anywhere. The media covered the story heavily at first. Local news showed photos of the 3 women. National news picked it up because the case was so strange. 3 people vanishing at once was unusual enough. 3 people vanishing without any evidence was almost unbelievable. The public watched and waited for answers. Then something important happened. Police received a call. The caller had information. The caller knew things about the case that had not been made public. Police tried to keep the caller on the line. They tried to get a name, a location, anything. But the call was transferred to a different department, and during the transfer, the line went dead. The caller never called back. This became a pattern. Tips came in. Some seemed promising. Most led nowhere. Police followed every single one. They drove to remote locations based on anonymous tips. They searched properties based on rumors. They interviewed people who claimed to have seen the women. Every tip was checked. Every lead was followed. And every single one ended in disappointment. By the end of June, 3 weeks after the disappearance, police had interviewed hundreds of people. They had searched thousands of acres. They had followed up on hundreds of tips. And they had exactly 0 suspects. They had no physical evidence. They had no witnesses. They had no motive. They had 3 missing women and a house that gave up no secrets. Yet one investigator who took the case seriously began to see patterns. Not in the evidence, because there was no evidence, but in the absence of evidence. Whoever did this knew how to avoid leaving traces. Whoever did this knew how to control 3 people at once without making noise. Whoever did this knew the neighborhood well enough to come and go without being seen. This was not random. This was not an accident. This was planned. The first theory that challenged everything came from this investigator. What if the person who took the women was someone they knew? What if it was someone they trusted enough to open the door for? What if it was someone who knew the layout of the house, knew that Cheryl lived alone, knew that the neighborhood was quiet? That would explain the lack of struggle. That would explain why the dog did not bark. That would explain why nobody heard anything. But this theory opened up horrible new questions. If the women knew their attacker, then who was it? And how could someone they trusted do something so evil? And if that person was still walking around Springfield, still living a normal life, still pretending to be innocent, what else were they capable of? The revelation that deepened the mystery came in the form of a simple fact. Police tested the theory that one person could control 3 women at once. They ran scenarios, they talked to experts, and the experts said the same thing. It is almost impossible for one person to abduct 3 people at the same time without weapons, without help, without making noise. The odds were against it, which meant either the person had a weapon, or there was more than one attacker, or something else happened that nobody had thought of yet. That thought terrified investigators more than anything else. Because if there were 2 attackers, that meant 2 people were keeping this secret. 2 people were walking around free. 2 people knew where the bodies were, and neither one was talking. Before the disappearance, Springfield was a quiet city where people felt safe. After the disappearance, everything changed. Parents locked their doors at night. Women who lived alone installed security systems. The whole city felt watched, hunted, afraid. The case transformed the way people thought about safety. If 3 women could vanish from a locked house in a good neighborhood, then nowhere was safe. Nobody was safe. The public wanted answers. They wanted someone arrested. They wanted to know their families were not in danger. But as weeks turned into months, police had nothing to give them. The media coverage became less frequent. The story faded from the front page. People stopped talking about it as much. But the families never stopped searching. Then came the attempts to discredit the case. Some people whispered that maybe the women had run away together. Maybe they staged their own disappearance. Maybe they wanted to start new lives somewhere else. Police shot down these theories immediately. The evidence made it clear. This was not voluntary, Nobody runs away without money, without clothes, without their car. Nobody stages a disappearance and leaves their purse behind. Other theories emerged. Some people said it was a random crime, a stranger passing through town, someone who saw an opportunity and took it. But that did not match the evidence either. Random crimes are messy. Random criminals make mistakes. Random abductions leave clues. This crime was clean, too clean. By late 1992, police had started comparing different explanations. The logical explanation was that someone with a weapon came to the house, forced the women to leave quietly, and took them somewhere remote. This person probably knew the area well. This person probably had a place already prepared. This person probably killed the women quickly and hid their bodies where they would never be found. But there were other explanations, darker ones, theories that police did not like to discuss publicly, theories about organized crime, theories about human trafficking, theories about serial killers who moved from place to place, taking victims and leaving no trace. These theories scared people because they suggested something bigger than one crime. They suggested patterns. They suggested other victims. They suggested evil that was still out there, still hunting. On December 31st, 1992, 6 months after the disappearance, the phone rang at the America's Most Wanted hotline. A man was calling. He said he had information about the 3 missing women from Springfield. The operator listened. The caller spoke with confidence. He knew details. He knew things that had not been released to the public. The operator realized this was important. This was real. She tried to connect the caller to investigators in Springfield, but something went wrong. The call disconnected. The line went dead, and the man never called back. Police made a public statement. They said the caller had what they described as prime knowledge of the abductions. They begged him to call back. They promised he would not be in trouble. They just wanted information. They just wanted to know what happened. But the man never responded, and that mysterious call became another piece of the puzzle that made no sense. Investigators started looking at known criminals. One name that came up was Robert Craig Cox. Cox was in prison in Texas. He was serving time for kidnapping and robbery. He was also suspected in a murder case in Florida. Cox had lived near Springfield. He had been in the area around the time of the disappearance. In 1997, 5 years after the women vanished, Cox spoke to journalists. The interview was chilling. Cox sat calmly. He looked directly at the camera, and he said, "I know that they are dead. Not I think or I believe." He said, "I know." The journalist pushed him. "How do you know?" Cox smiled slightly and said, "I just know that they are dead. That's not my theory. I just know that. There's no doubt about that." The journalist asked where the bodies were. Cox leaned back and said the bodies would never be recovered. Then he stopped talking. He refused to answer any more questions. Police interviewed Cox multiple times. They asked him where he was the night of June 6th, 1992. Cox said he was home alone in bed. No alibi, no proof, just his word. Police pressed him. They tried to get him to admit involvement. They tried to get him to tell them where the bodies were. Cox said nothing. Eventually, investigators concluded that Cox had no real credibility. He was a criminal who liked attention. He was probably lying, but they could never prove it either way. Another name emerged. Larry Dwayne Hall. Hall was suspected of being a serial killer. He traveled around the Midwest going to Civil War reenactments. Police believed he used these events as cover to abduct, rape, torture, and murder women. Dozens of women, maybe more. Hall had been in Missouri in June 1992. In fact, there were 2 Civil War reenactment events on June 6th in Pleasant Hope, Missouri. Pleasant Hope was just 30 minutes north of Springfield. Hall fit a profile. He was organized. He was careful. He was smart. He knew how to avoid leaving evidence, and he had means and opportunity. But police could never connect him directly to the Springfield Three. They tried. They investigated. They compared timelines. But there was nothing solid, nothing they could use to charge him. Hall became another name on a list of people who might have done it, but probably did not. In 2007, 15 years after the disappearance, a new tip came in. Someone told police that the 3 women were buried in the foundation of a parking garage at Cox Hospital in Springfield. This was specific. This was detailed. A crime reporter named Kathy Baird heard about the tip. She hired a mechanical engineer named Rick Norland. Norland brought ground-penetrating radar equipment to the south parking garage. He scanned a corner of the structure, and he found something. 3 anomalies. 3 spaces in the concrete that looked wrong. They were roughly the same size. They were in a row. They were consistent with what graves would look like under layers of concrete. Norland showed his findings to police. He said the anomalies matched what he would expect to find if bodies were buried there. He urged police to dig. But the Springfield Police Department said no. A spokesperson named Lisa Cox explained why. The parking garage started construction in September 1993. That was over a year after the women disappeared. Digging up the garage would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. It would require closing part of the hospital. It would disrupt operations. And there was no reasonable belief that the bodies were actually there. Just a tip, just radar readings, just possibilities. The police called it illogical to dig. Families of the missing women begged police to reconsider. Supporters raised money to help pay for the digging. Engineers volunteered their time. But the answer stayed the same. No, the garage was never excavated. To this day, those 3 anomalies remain under the concrete, and nobody knows what they are. More searches happened over the years. In April 2003, tips led investigators to farmland south of Cassville, Missouri. They brought in backhoes. They dug huge holes in the earth. They searched for days. They found 2 items. One looked like it might be blood. The other was part of a green vehicle. They sent both items for testing. The results came back inconclusive. Not enough to prove anything. Not enough to solve anything. Witnesses started recanting. People who had given tips years earlier now said they made mistakes. People who thought they saw something now said they were wrong. Some witnesses went completely silent. They stopped talking to police. They stopped talking to reporters. They just disappeared from the investigation, as if they were afraid of something or someone. Police reports from the early days of the investigation revealed strange details. One report mentioned that the house smelled normal when police first entered. No smell of decay, no chemical smells, no sign that violence had happened there recently. Another report noted that the weather that night had been mild, temperature in the 60s, no rain, no storms. Good weather for someone to move around outside without being noticed. Court documents showed that police had pursued dozens of search warrants over the years. They searched homes. They searched vehicles. They searched storage units and abandoned buildings. Every search turned up nothing. Every warrant led to a dead end. Newspaper articles from 1992 captured the fear in Springfield. One headline read, "3 women vanish without a trace." Another said, "Police baffled by disappearance." The articles quoted neighbors saying they were scared. They quoted police saying they had never seen anything like this. They quoted family members begging for information. Recorded interviews with investigators showed their frustration. One detective said it was like the women had been erased from existence. Another said it was the cleanest crime scene he had ever seen. Too clean. Impossibly clean. As if someone had wiped away every trace of what happened. The most terrifying fact came not from evidence, but from absence. Decades later, there had been no confirmed sightings, no ransom demands, no bodies found, no deathbed confessions, no evidence washing up somewhere, no construction workers digging up bones years later. Nothing. If 3 people had been removed from the world so completely that it was as if they had never existed. And that was when logic started to fail. Because people do not just vanish. Bodies do not just disappear. Crimes do not happen without leaving some trace. Yet that is exactly what the evidence suggested. 3 women went to sleep in a house in Springfield, Missouri. And by morning, they were gone so completely that 30 years of searching could not find a single answer. In 1997, 5 years after they vanished, Cheryl Levitt and Susie Streeter were declared legally dead. The courts needed to close estates. Families needed to move forward. But the police never changed the classification. The case files still say missing, not dead, not solved, just missing. Because without bodies, without proof, the women exist in a strange space between life and death. The case remains open today with the Springfield Police Department. Detectives still work on it when new tips come in. The file is thick, thousands of pages, hundreds of interviews, decades of investigation, and still no arrests, still no charges, still no answers. The investigation transformed how police handle crime scenes. The Springfield 3 case is now taught in training academies. It is used as an example of how quickly a crime scene can be contaminated. It shows why securing a scene immediately is critical. Those 10 to 20 people who walked through the house that first morning, trying to help, accidentally created a case study in what not to do. Laws changed because of this case. Missouri passed new legislation about missing persons investigations, and the rules became stricter. The timelines became faster. Police could not wait as long before treating a disappearance as a crime. The Springfield 3 made that happen. Their absence created new protections for others. Local culture shifted too. Springfield stopped feeling like a small, safe town. People installed better locks. They bought security cameras. They taught their children to be more careful. The case haunted the city. Even today, people who were children in 1992 remember their parents being afraid. They remember being told to lock doors and stay together. They remember the missing posters on every corner. What happened to the people involved in the case is its own kind of tragedy. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, never stopped searching. She founded a nonprofit organization called One Missing Link. The organization supports families of missing persons. She speaks at events. She keeps her daughter's case in the public eye. She refuses to give up. Every year on the anniversary, she does interviews. She shares new photos. She asks people to remember, to care, to help. Bart Streeter, Susie's brother and Cheryl's son, fell apart. The grief consumed him. In 2019, 27 years after losing his mother and sister, He was arrested for public drunkenness and disorderly conduct. The police report described a man who could not cope, a man broken by loss, a man who never got answers, never got closure, never got peace. The house at 1717 East Delmar Street was sold. New families have lived there over the years. Some stayed, some left quickly. Nobody talks much about why. But everyone in Springfield knows that address. Everyone knows what happened there. Or rather, everyone knows that something happened there, even if nobody knows what. Around Springfield, a few storefronts still display photos. 3 faces frozen in time: Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy. The photos are from 1992. The women look young and happy and alive. The photos are faded now. The paper is yellowed, but they stay up. Someone keeps replacing them. Someone refuses to let the city forget. What we still do not know is almost everything. We do not know who took them. We do not know why. We do not know how one person or 2 people, or however many people it took, managed to remove 3 women from a house without anyone hearing. We do not know where they went. We do not know if they were taken far away or if they are buried close by. We do not know if they died quickly or if they suffered. We do not know if the person who did this is still alive, still free, still walking around Springfield. We do not know who made that call on New Year's Eve with detailed knowledge of the crime. We do not know what the erased answering machine message said. We do not know if those 3 anomalies under the Cox Hospital parking garage are graves or just cracks in concrete. We do not know if Larry Dwayne Hall was in Springfield that night. We do not know if Robert Craig Cox was telling the truth or playing games. We do not know anything for certain except that 3 women are gone. Modern cases echo the Springfield 3. Women who vanish without trace. Families who search for years. Cases that go cold, the pattern repeats. In the years since 1992, technology has improved. We have cell phones now. We have surveillance cameras everywhere. We have GPS tracking. We have DNA databases. But even with all that technology, people still disappear. Cases still go unsolved. The Springfield 3 just happened in an era before those tools existed. If it happened today, maybe there would be answers. Or maybe not. Maybe whoever did this was just that careful, that lucky, that evil. The case transformed public belief about safety. People used to think that being in a group made you safe. 3 people together should be able to fight off an attacker. 3 people together should be able to make noise, call for help, escape. The Springfield. 3 proved that belief wrong. Numbers do not always protect you. Being together does not always save you. People used to trust locked doors. They thought that locking up at night meant you were safe, that criminals could not get in, that you could sleep peacefully. The Springfield 3 proved that wrong too. Locked doors did not stop what happened. Locked doors did not save anyone. People used to believe that crimes always leave evidence, that police can always find something, that forensic science can solve anything. The Springfield 3 proved that sometimes a crime can be so clean, so careful, so perfectly executed that there is nothing to find. And that thought is more terrifying than any monster. The families live with questions that have no answers. Janice McCall does not know where her daughter is. She does not know if Stacy is buried somewhere, waiting to be found. She does not know if she should keep hoping or accept that hope is gone. She exists in a state of permanent grief, permanent uncertainty, permanent waiting. The investigators live with failure. They did everything they could. They followed every lead. They worked thousands of hours, and they could not solve it. Some of them are retired now. Some have died. But the ones still alive carry the case with them. It is the one that got away, the one that haunts them, the one they think about late at night. Springfield lives with a shadow. Somewhere in that city, someone might know the truth. Maybe it is the person who did it. Maybe it is someone who helped. Maybe it is someone who saw something and stayed quiet out of fear. But someone knows. And that person wakes up every day, goes to work, sees neighbors, lives a normal life, and carries a secret that could bring peace to 3 families. The philosophical truth is this: we want to believe the world makes sense. We want to believe that crimes get solved, that bad people get caught, that justice happens, that families get closure. We want to believe that the truth always comes out eventually. The Springfield 3 challenges all of that. This case says that sometimes evil wins. Sometimes criminals are smart enough, lucky enough, cruel enough to get away with it completely. Sometimes the truth stays buried forever. And maybe the scariest part is not what happened to Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy. Maybe the scariest part is what their case reveals about how many others might have vanished just as completely. How many other families are searching? How many other cases went cold? How many other secrets are buried under parking garages, or in remote woods, or in places nobody thought to look? Somewhere, 3 women disappeared. Somewhere, their bodies might still be waiting. Somewhere, someone knows exactly where. And that person is still out there, still free, still carrying the weight of what they did. Or maybe they are dead now too, taking the secret to their own grave. Either way, the truth might stay hidden forever. The final unsettling thought is not complicated. It is simple and horrible and real. You can lock your doors. You can be with friends. You can do everything right. And still, in one dark night, in 5 quiet hours, you can be erased from existence so completely that decades of searching finds nothing. The Springfield 3 proved it is possible. And if it happened once, it can happen again. What if it already has? What if right now, somewhere in America, 3 more people are missing, and nobody has connected the dots yet? What if the person who took Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy did not stop? What if they just got better at hiding their crimes? The case is not closed. The search is not over. The families are still waiting. And somewhere in Springfield, Missouri, under concrete or dirt or water, 3 women are still missing, still waiting to be found, still waiting for someone to speak up, still waiting for justice that may never come. The question is not just what happened to them anymore. The question is whether we will ever know. And the answer, after more than 30 years of silence, seems to be no.